In this section, we're going to go over interviewing, everything from the different types of interviews you can expect to how you can prepare. We'll start with what I call the average process. Consider that every company can have their own interview process, but across all these different companies when it comes to software development, there's going to be some things which are common and things which are less common. This will cover everything from the initial application and contact involvement with a recruiter, all the way up to an executive meeting for higher level positions. Let's start with the application or initial contact. So there's two ways in which this can happen. The first way is where you just fill out some general application online or on a job board and wait back and hear something. The other one is when you're contacted by a recruiter or contacting that recruiter directly. This is all about the initial interest. What you're trying to do is getting loose alignment on, yes, I'm interested in this job and we should talk about it, or nope, sorry, this isn't for me. The whole point of this is scheduling that initial conversation. That initial conversation is nearly always going to be with the recruiter. The recruiter either for a contracting company, the company itself, or a consulting firm. There's going to be somebody from a human resources perspective responsible for doing this initial screen about a job opportunity. As always, be upfront about money. A lot of these job postings don't put rates and compensation as a part of them. Therefore, it's really important in the interest of your time and their time to be upfront about what you're looking for. I have personally encountered job opportunities asking for somebody with 20 years experience and a master's degree paying what interns get. So you have to be very clear about what you're looking for in terms of compensation. That also goes back to the employment type. Most jobs will put whether it's W-2 or 1099 in them, but in the event it's not specified, make sure to confirm that it is the one you're looking for. Just as with the location, a lot of jobs are going to go as far as saying remote or hybrid, but if they don't list it, you can probably assume it's going to be on-site. So you also want to confirm this if it wasn't a part of the initial job specification. You also want to figure out, in the case of dealing with a recruiter, who the work is actually for. If the recruiter is operating on behalf of another company, you want to figure that out up front. Generally speaking, this is going to be a 15 to 30 minute conversation. There's no need to really spend more time with it. This is all about that initial conversation and deciding whether it's a close enough fit to go through the interview process. Something which is fairly common, but you won't always have to do, is a test or demonstration of skills. This is more common for somebody more junior in their career and will be dealt with either from the initial conversation and the recruiter, or the company itself may ask for this. Consider that time is money. Any time you're going to spend here is on your own and you're not going to be compensated for it. What's going to happen is you'll generally be asked to either do some kind of test, go online and do a HackerRank test, or even do some sort of project or demonstration of your capabilities. This is entirely up to you. I tend to time box things at 30 minutes. Consider that I may have other opportunities at the same time, and I don't want to have to spend 30 minutes on, let's say, 20 opportunities. That's a huge amount of time investment. Also consider, though, if you are on the junior end of the spectrum, you're probably going to be required to do this, and there's just no way around it. After that initial conversation, or possibly after you've taken some sort of skills verification, it's very likely you're going to encounter what we call a technical screen. Consider that the recruiter themselves is generally not going to have the capability to know whether you know what you're talking about in terms of what the job requires. A technical screen is when you have a generally 30-minute conversation with somebody who's a more senior developer. This will sometimes be referred to as the resume lie detector test. As mentioned before in the resume section, it's very important to be honest on your resume about your skills and capabilities, because from my perspective, as someone who does a lot of technical screens, anything on your resume is fair game for a question. And if I continue to ask you questions about stuff you put on your resume and you can't answer them, you're going to fail this technical screen and not move on. The best way to pass a technical screen is to, 1, be honest with yourself in terms of skill and level, and otherwise know what you're good at versus what you're not good at. It's also very important, even if you're familiar, to Google the common interview questions for whatever your technology stack is. For example, if you're applying for a Java developer position, Google common Java interview questions, and you're going to find a list of probably 100, in which 20 of them are going to be very, very common that you could just look at and know beforehand. It's also important not to make stuff up. If you don't know the answer, don't make something up, because they're going to know that. I've had cases where I asked a simple yes or no binary type question and I got a 10-minute long lecture that was complete nonsense. That person ended that interview about the first 2 minutes into that answer. If you don't know, say I don't know. Also, at the end of the interview, don't ask how you did. Generally speaking, this can never end well. If it went well, they might say it, but otherwise don't ask. A lot of times, you're asking the interviewer to essentially get involved in a confrontation if you didn't do well, because obviously they say, well, you didn't do very well. You're going to be like, why? What did I do? And that's just not going to end well, so don't ask how you did. It's also worth noting that if the interview ends early, or if all of a sudden the interview switches to, well, tell me about your experiences here, and it's a technical screen, you probably failed. Generally speaking, it's important to note that someone doing a technical screen may have to do 50 or 100 of these, and they don't want to spend even an additional 20 minutes that they don't have to. In the case where I'm applying for something, or I'm having someone apply for a job that requires that somebody be a senior Java developer, if that person can't answer the 5 basic questions about Java development, there's no point in continuing the interview, and there have been many times in which I just stated, sorry, this is for a hands-on position requiring you to actively write lots of Java code. And I don't think that this is what you currently do, and you can end it there. Otherwise, if you're not comfortable doing that, the interview will say, well, just stop asking questions after they fail enough of them and just say, well, tell me about your experience to fill up the remaining time. In the event you get through the technical screen, assuming there was one, you're now likely going to have what we call a panel screen. This is generally going to be for more senior developer positions, but it's going to involve talking to multiple people at the same time in the same meeting. Instead of asking questions like, what's the difference between a map and a hash map, in whatever your technology stack is, this is going to focus on more contextual and architectural questions. What would you do in this situation? And maybe even get into some type of problem solving. Sometimes, as within the technical screen, you'll actually be asked to code during an interview. It's become fairly common for someone to bring up one of these coding sites and say, write a method to do this activity. Solve this problem using a method. That can also be done during these higher level interview positions as well as lower level ones to make sure you're comfortable being able to code and think in a higher stress type environment. These panel screens will tend to be anywhere from 60 to 90 minutes. If they go beyond this, you're really going to need a break because these can sometimes be intense. They're really about having a conversation about how you think, how you work, and how you're going to fit into whatever their working environment is. It's also common, especially for architecture or higher level positions, to be asked to do some sort of special project. Generally speaking, this is not going to be a coding project, but some sort of proof of concept or example system architecture. Consider that time is money. The only time I consider doing these special projects is if I'm interested inside the company, I've already gone through several rounds of interviews, and this is used to really get a feel for my capabilities as, in this case, an architect. I've also listed an example of which I did this, involving building an example architecture given a set of specific technologies. My recommendation, though, is still to limit this to around 5 hours because you can spend as much time as you want on this, but generally speaking, you'll be given probably a week to come up with some sort of solution. This is also more common at much smaller companies or startups because consider that a higher level position at a smaller company has a lot more weight in meetings, so people want to be really sure about bringing somebody on, especially from the outside in terms of a skill fit. After getting through all of the various technical screens and interviews, you're going to have what's known as a fit screen. This is about a cultural fit, and this is going to always happen. This is usually an interview with someone in management or multiple people in management. It's not going to involve technical questions, but will probably be scenario-based. They're going to ask about situations you've encountered from a non-technical perspective. For example, when have you ever had to deal with somebody who was confrontational? How did you deal with that? What would you do in this situation? They're also going to ask at various times about your current company. It's important to understand that you want to stay as positive as possible here. This is almost like dating. You should be on your best behavior here, so don't trash talk your current company. Consider that everyone has different experiences, and just because you had a negative experience doesn't mean they need to hear about the details of it. Say that it didn't work, give a high-level overview, but definitely don't take the time to talk about all the things, because what you don't want is this to turn into complaining, because that's going to be a red flag from their perspective. When it comes to higher level positions, and especially at small companies, just like sometimes you'll be asked to do a special project, you may be asked to have what we call an executive meeting with somebody at the C-level, meaning the CEO or CIO or CTO. And this is again about the risk they're taking on by hiring you at a smaller company from the outside or just into a higher level position in general. They want to make sure you're not only a cultural fit, but you're a strategic fit. The higher you are in a company, the more influence you can have over their ability to do their business. And so they want to make sure that you're a good fit, you're going to be sticking around for a while, and you're generally aligned when it comes to goals and responsibilities. At the end of the day, a lot of this meeting has to do with being about learning about what you and you want instead of the other way around.